Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Purceller. I'm the Sustainability Manager here at Moraine Valley Community College, and today is one of many Earth Month events that's happening this month of April. You can go to morainevalley.edu/sustainability to learn more about the different events that are going on. But today we have a very exciting topic to cover with you. We'll spend about 40 to 45 minutes talking about food and beer from a sustainable perspective. So we have with us one of our own professors, Bill Hogan, who typically teaches COM here at the college, but he tends to do so from a very unique perspective, looking at the sustainability of food and beverage that we like to consume. So Bill is going to talk to us more about local, organic, sustainable food and where we can find it right here in our own backyard. I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Thank you all for your attention.
All right. Thank you for coming and sharing your lunch with me. I just wanted to highlight the restaurants in particular where you can go, you can get breakfast, lunch, dinner, and find some either local, seasonal, organic food, sort of three of the hallmarks of sustainable food. Several in the area. If you see on the map here, they're not all right here on the south side. In Palos, we have Harvest Room. I'll talk about that first. And there are several food options on the south side. Everything you see in like pink, red is a food option, and everything that you see in green is a beer option. For the most part, those are breweries. Most of those breweries have tap rooms, so you can go there and, if you're above 21, you can go there and enjoy the beer on premise. Several of them, like this one right here, this is Three Floyds in Indiana. They have excellent restaurants as well that double as sustainable food restaurants in addition to their sustainable beer, I'll call it. Because, one thing I was talking, what's your name again? I was talking before it started with Matt, that when you look for a sustainable restaurant or option to where to eat out, it doesn't really have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be something that is so pristine and there's not one aspect of it that's not entirely organic and entirely green in every aspect. There's so many facets of sustainability that you don't want to take one or two areas in which maybe it's not feasible for them or they haven't gotten there yet and hold it against them. You want to sort of celebrate what makes them sustainable. What are the aspects? And so with all of these, there's plenty of ways in which they are. Some of them are as close to perfect as you can get. In Chicago, we even have the greenest restaurant in the United States. It's not pictured here. There's just too many. So let's start with the first one, which is on the map right here in Palos, and it's the Harvest Room restaurant. Have you been there? Has anyone here been to Harvest Room? You know it? Yeah? It's good, right? Yeah. And they're really, really nice. I had lunch there with my mom last week, and she had no idea it was in the area. And I think this is something that on the south side, it's a little bit novel, this movement towards local, sustainable, seasonal, organic. It's still not the norm, but that's changing rapidly, and if the rest of the country is any indication, it will change in short order. Because like where I live in the city, for example, I couldn't really imagine a new restaurant or a new bar opening up and not having significant aspects of the business be local, tell you where the farms that they source their produce from, talk about the breed of the animals that they use, really highlight these aspects of sustainability. Harvest Room in Palos is one of the first that I know of on the south side that does this. And you could see, like if you go to their website, they have a tab for how they're green. They have several things where most sustainable restaurants, sustainable food businesses, they will be as transparent as possible. They will be explicit about the ways in which they're proud of where their food comes from and the food that they're selling to you. So here they say our concept is simple from farm to table. That's one of those big watchwords in the food industry. This is something that really took off in the US in around the 1990s. There was a thing called the slow food movement, and that originated in Italy, but was adopted here. And this idea of knowing your food, connecting it as closely as possible to an actual farm where the produce, where the meat, where the dairy, any of the products come from. So here we have Harvest Room. They highlight, whenever possible, they go with they go with local, organic, or organically raised ingredients purchased from area farmers when possible. And again, it's when possible. They don't have to be absolutely perfect. Ideally, they'll be explicit when they're not locally sourced on a given day. That's one of the hallmarks, transparency. One word I have to just highlight that is always to keep in mind, fresh. This word fresh is something that seems to be a really good thing. And fresh is not a bad thing, the word fresh. But what does fresh even mean? What does fresh mean?
Never frozen.
Fresh means never frozen, okay? Wendy's tells us this all the time, fresh, never frozen, right? I was listening to the radio the other day. I listen to the radio every day. And there was a commercial for Speedway gas station. And they were talking about their breakfast tornadoes that are on their breakfast. And they say, fresh off the grill. I guarantee you those breakfast tornadoes were frozen previously. and they could say fresh off the grill without anyone saying, you're lying to me. Subway, eat fresh. What does that mean? Not rotten? Fresh is one of these meaningless words that it's not bad, but when you see a food place emphasizing fresh to the exclusion of any other thing, like organic or like local or like farm to table, when they're just emphasizing fresh, they usually have nothing for you. They're more or less misleading. Because I would say at this point, it's not that they don't have the vocabulary. It's I saw a commercial for Jewel. Fresh, 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 fresh. But not once telling you where the food actually comes from. Like, what farm do your tomatoes come from? The beef. Tell me about it. That's one of those things. Transparency is what you want to look for. So on Harvest Room's menu, this is another thing about sustainable restaurants. They will explicitly tell you often if there's bacon in the omelet, the farm that they get the bacon from, where the pigs come from that's in the bacon. They'll overwhelmingly go into detail and sort of reassure you. It's a smart business decision. It differentiates them from competitors. And often, if you notice here, it's not like really expensive, but for the South Side, they have an omelet for $14. They have a breakfast burrito for $9. So it's a little bit more expensive than if you were to go to the standard diner. So part of it's justified by the quality of the ingredients. And on the menu right here, again, they're telling you, you don't even have to ask, they're telling you that they want to provide the customers with the highest quality food. They don't serve antibiotic or meat treated with antibiotics. They're hormone-free, pasture-raised, cage-free eggs, non-GMO oils. That is such a big thing. And I encourage you to check out the place. When I talk about beer, they serve a lot of the beers that I'll mention, a lot of the local breweries, craft beer exclusively. So I would say, bye. Love you. Okay, so you have Harvest Room here in Palos. Another place that is not far, it's in Crestwood on 127. It's called Country House. And Country House Restaurant, they'll say it's family owned, it's independent. This is usually associated with sustainability. It's not that to be family owned means you're sustainable, but a lot of the sustainable food options are independent, are not part of some larger chain. There's still not that many chains that are very sustainable. But the thing that they do here, I just want to show, they have this less than 3 minute video with Country House, is the chef there, while he sources from local farms. They have 5 area farms that they get their all of their meat and produce from. He also gets involved with local high schools and is trying to sort of intervene in the national obesity epidemic by sort of educating high school kids on how delicious, fresh, local, organic, sustainable food can be. And just simple stuff. I mean, it's not like he's making them radically change their diet. He's just making real food. And here's just a brief video.
Ask high school senior Julio de la Cruz what lunch consisted of at his old school, and his answer may not surprise you.
Ice cream, soda, drinks, chips, stuff like that. Normally it'd be like cheeseburger Fridays or pizza Fridays.
What might be surprising is what he's eating for lunch today at his new school, Holy Trinity.
Can you have a dinner? You want the salad and broccoli? Want the salad with it?
Meet Paul Valdez, a chef dedicated to bringing healthy cuisine to area schools in conjunction with the National School Lunch Program.
Here at Holy Trinity, there's 85% of the students here are on the National School Lunch Program, free and reduced lunches, so we're basically getting reimbursed like $2.90 per meal. It's kind of a challenge, something that we want to give with food. It can be done, and we hear all these stories that it's not possible, and fresh food is too expensive, and it's actually the other way around, where it's cheaper to do it, but it's a lot more labor intensive.
More time yields greater health benefits, which is important in a country where 18% of adolescents are classified as obese.
Unhealthy eating increases one's serum cholesterol and lipids, which is going to result in heart disease. It also causes a diabetes risk. Beyond the fact that overweight is a social stigma to this day, kids who are overweight still suffer from bullying, depression, and poor self-esteem that go with it.
Paul's secret to healthy eating is a simple one.
The main thing that we try to do is just have the food be good tasting. I don't think that any human really has an aversion to good tasting food.
It still tastes good even though it's healthy.
I love that.
The students don't just enjoy the food, they're learning from it.
What modeling children healthy lunches can do is show them all the different foods that they haven't tasted or they haven't been exposed to that are tasty as well as nutritious.
One time with broccoli, that we were doing it for the students in the culinary club, and we blanched it really fast in boiling salted water just to get that green color to shoot out. And the amazing on that, they were like, "You're a magician! Like, how did you do that? How did you figure that out?" It seems that that excitement over food, you can hear the kids say, I didn't go to McDonald's today because the food in school was better. Is where you really kind of see the changes.
The food that's made here is healthy and it tastes good. It inspires us to have a healthy diet and inspires us to live a healthy life.
So that's the chef from Country House in Crestwood, and the restaurant, it's not typical of a sustainable restaurant that you would find in the city. Well, I mean, it's called Country House, even though there are country-themed places in a city. But they have one of those menus that's sort of like 9 pages long. The actual dining room area is sort of cavernous. It's an interesting dynamic in the restaurant. I definitely encourage you to check it out. The food is really good, but it is another illustration of how on the South Side, the sustainability aesthetic, the sort of common vocabulary of knowing what to look for, how it's a selling point, it's not as yet developed as in a lot of urban areas around the country and in other parts of the city, frankly, and the suburbs. So Country House, good spot, 127th, and it's in Alsip, I guess. Maple Tree Inn. This is a little gem if you haven't been. It's in Blue Island, so probably right near the Blue Island campus of Moraine. And it's been around for a long time. I think they had new ownership changeover, but I think it stayed within the family within the last 10 years. It's been voted one of the best craft beer bars in Chicagoland and apparently in the country. They have, for the most part, it's New Orleans style food. It's Cajun and Creole food. It's right underneath a train track near, I guess, the Cal Sag or something there. And it has like this, that's the Cal Sag, yeah. There's just like a charm about the setup. It's on the corner of Old Western Avenue. It's really dark inside. Great place to check out. And here's one where when you look on the menu, they have all, right, crawfish, cardinal, a lot of like throwback recipes. Oysters, right? One, oysters Bienville, cream sauce with garlic, mushrooms, shrimp, provolone cheese. That's such a like 1950s awesome, yeah. It's fantastic, yes. Not many places for oysters on the south side, so that's good. But if you go all the way to the bottom of their menu, and this is even on the printed menu, they have about some of the foods we prepare. This is something to always look for in a sustainable restaurant. Either they'll most often tell you. You don't have to ask. They will tell you where the food comes from. And here, they do it in a way. They talk about some of their sort of French terms or the New Orleans style foods. But then they have this little section. Where do you source your ingredients, right? And they say, we get the majority of our seafood fresh from the Gulf or the East Coast from trusted suppliers that we've worked with over the decades. That doesn't really tell us anything. But at least they're acknowledging a little bit about, hey, think about where the food comes from that you're eating. The fact that it comes from the Gulf Coast is not necessarily enough information. But they do say that our produce is sourced from local farmers whenever possible. Meat is sourced from local Midwest farms. You'd like them to tell you the name of the farm, to be as explicit as possible. To sort of build this sort of body of knowledge that diners and citizens can have about, oh, Slagle Family Farms. Okay, I'm familiar with that. That's one of several farms that have really become prominent. If you live in a certain part of the city and you eat out, you don't have to spend a lot of money, but a lot of places source from this excellent sustainable farm. And then you start to like know that, and you start to think about that. And then when a place doesn't tell you where their food is coming from, it's a good thing that you have that little alarm bell. Like, why aren't you telling me that? Why can't you tell me that? Okay, but that's a charming place. Highly recommend it. Excellent for beer, too. Not far from there, actually, in Roseland is a brewery. Not very old. Argus Brewery, one of the dozen or so craft breweries that have popped up in the last 10 years in Chicago and the surrounding areas. And going into areas that are underdeveloped, that are economically depressed, and creating jobs, and building sort of these manufacturing beer. It's great. And a big thing that these sustainable food places, what they offer, wherever they are, is a sense of identity. Like when you go somewhere and you eat the food that is particular to the place, that's a creation of an identity. I mean, that's a natural thing. We sort of take it for granted. But it's reemerging with sustainable restaurants, with craft breweries. I was just recently in Nashville, and everywhere you go, they're only selling beer from Nashville, right? And if you go into the city, or if you go into Harvest Room in Palos, and you go to get a beer, the majority of the beer comes from Chicago and the suburbs and the surrounding area. That's such a essential sense of identity, of place, that these places give us. A personal favorite, Calumet Fisheries. This one on the map, You see it's on 95th all the way almost at the lake. The Calumet River comes up. If you go to the street view of Calumet Fisheries, it's just this shack. And if you've seen the movie Blues Brothers, at the end of the movie, the bridge, and the cop car. I drive an old cop car, an old black and white beat up cop car, and I went there to pick up fish. This was like a year or 2 years ago. And now Calumet Fisheries has got this national reputation. So there were people in with Ohio license plates and Indiana license plates, and you go in, you can't eat in there. They serve smoked salmon, smoked trout, smoked shrimp is really one of their specialties. And so anyway, all these people are sitting there on the curb eating their smoked fish, and I pull up in the black and white beat up cop car, and I just jump out, and they stared at me like, is this real? Is he out of a movie? Because he drives that car on the south side? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Definitely check it out. And for maybe $10, $15, you can't go wrong with the quality of the products. Yeah, they've been around 65 years. Won an award, a James Beard Award for local food, national recognition. I'm going to skip to, let's say you're going to a White Sox game and you want to eat sustainably. And maybe you're with a group of people that, can't necessarily decide on what they're in the mood for. I'd encourage you to go to 31st and Morgan, to a great little corner that has 3 outstanding sustainable food and drink options. There is in brown there, I did brown, that's a Bridgeport Coffee House. In green is Maria's Packaged Goods and Community Bar. And the first one I'm talking about is on the corner, Pleasant House Bakery. Pleasant House Bakery is a unbelievable, I can't believe that Chicago didn't have a place like this before it came out. It's British style pies. They do, my favorite one is actually a vegetarian. It's mushroom and kale in this sort of unbelievably buttery, it's not vegan, but unbelievably buttery, crispy, just absolutely satisfying pie crust. They have a lot of meat pies as well. And it's sort of this just very simple British pie place. One of the most remarkable things about them, though, is that if you look at their I think it's either about food and drink. Their produce, all of the kale and all of the salads that you can get that are delicious there, all of it is sourced from their own farms that are scattered throughout the city of Chicago. They call them Pleasant Farms, and almost all of it. The rest that isn't, they get from local farmers markets and other farms in the city. But what's fascinating about the place is that they use vacant lots in Bridgeport, in back of the yards, and all over, and they have these vacant lots where they grow gardens and use that in the restaurant. They have apparently these gardening classes. You can go and sort of get these sort of, urban guerrilla gardening lessons with them. I'm absolutely going to do that this summer. But that's something that a sustainable place will have some feature like that. Like that salad you're eating, yeah, it was grown 2 blocks from here. And some people might be like, that's gross. You grew it on a sort of vacant lot. Maybe, but it isn't. Which I've had. Yeah. When you're not in Chinatown, they call it squab. Can be very good. But yeah, Pleasant House, excellent. And 31st and Morgan. So before you go to the White Sox game, check that out. Maria's used to be this sort of dingy, slashy, where it's half liquor store, half bar, and it was full of all these dolls that were just kind of like really creepy, but just gave it this charm, this just really run-down looking place. And it was revamped. The son of Maria sort of took over, and a couple years ago really renovated the place, and now it has a big emphasis on local craft beer and sustainability. And the way that Maria's is sustainable is through community. They call themselves a community bar, and you could see on the left side of the website, they talk about, here are our neighbors. Here are other bars and restaurants and companies that we support that do things sustainably, whether they're actively involved in the community, whether they're doing really innovative, excellent things to reduce their environmental footprint, whether they're all about the sourcing of their ingredients. Usually it's a combination. But this place is they sponsor all sort of literary and musical events. The emphasis is on community. And I'm trying to think, where do they? Yeah, so they have special events. They're aligned with several community organizations. They've been around since 1986. The DIY redo, so they did the renovation themselves. But here, where they talk about, Maria is committed to our neighborhood and the communities it supports. Our business sponsors a myriad of local media projects like Lumpin', I'm familiar with that one, Mash Tun, it's a craft beer journal. They have think tank and artistic, expositions, and one of the best craft beer selections around. Hello. One of the best craft beer selections around. Did that just happen? Yeah, no, I wasn't. All good. Awesome. And we're back. Okay. Bridgeport Coffee House, roast the coffee locally, locally sourced baked goods. They use organic flour in their baked goods. Really nothing too expensive on that corner. Whether you want to eat, drink, have coffee, go online, use the internet. It's super approachable, super good. A few other places. I want to highlight 3 really affordable, easy places. One is Epic Burger. It's one of the few chains that is approaching their food sustainably. Epic Burger is just a kind of like a classic South Side burger place where it's the thinner patty, but it's all grass-fed beef. The chicken sandwiches that they have are all free-range, organic. So a place that focuses on beef primarily, chicken primarily. They take it seriously where the beef comes from. And they tell you, the customer, right there, when you eat our burgers, you're getting 100% grass-fed, free-range beef. Go to a McDonald's or a Wendy's and say, where is this beef coming from? Tell me about the cow. Tell me about that. This would be an obnoxious question to ask. But what is actually obnoxious about it? You're about to pay your money and consume something that they specialize in selling, and they can't even tell you what they're selling you? That's disturbing. So Epic Burger, and it's doing phenomenally well. You can find them all over the city. I just picked this one location, but there are at least, 7 or 8 that I can think of, right in the Loop, right near Millennium Park, up near Lincoln Park. And for $10, you have burger, fries, or burger salad, less than $10. Excellent smoothies, shakes, very good place. Choko. Choko is I think there's only one, one of a kind. It's through Rick Bayless, the famous Mexican food chef in Chicago, whose commitment to sustainability is amazing in every way. The things that they do at his restaurants are just like, it's fantastic. It's a national, international model. The website for all the restaurants goes into tons of detail about where they source all of their food, how they deliberately, for the sake of the quality of their food and because it's in line with their values, they only work with local farms. They only work with artisanal sort of people who take pride in what they do, and there's nothing shameful about their operation, whether it's the honey that they use or the chocolate that they use or the coffee. But Choko is the one, he has 3 restaurants right on this corner, Clark and 449 North Clark. And there's Topolobampo is the really expensive one. Frontera is the not very cheap, but it's moderately priced. And especially for the quality, it's well priced. You know, you could have a dinner, 2 people for $50, $60. Depends if you're drinking, which the margaritas are worth it. But Choko is a lunch place. And you can have an amazing sandwich, an amazing, you know, they have soups that are amazing. What do they have? Lunch and dinner. Let's take a look. Yeah, the tortas are the big thing. $10, $9. Cochinita pibil, that's my favorite one. Wood roasted suckling pig with achiote, black beans, pickled onions, habanero. When you go into the restaurant, they tell you on the wall all the farms and exactly where the food that you're getting. So if you're going to get pork, they say our pork comes from this farm. And if you're going to get beef, it comes from this farm. All of our vegetables come from these 3 farms. That's one of the biggest aspects of a sustainable restaurant. Their buildings there, LEED certified, green certified, their operations, I can't speak to all the details there, but you know, they have a rooftop garden and they have energy efficient appliances and everything. Fantastic. If you go to rickbayless.com, that's where you can find a whole list of everything they do. New place, not far from where we live, Stephanie, on Western and Augusta. It's called Leghorn Chicken. And they're kind of funny in the sense that they are like a direct, they're the opposite of Chick-fil-A, aside from the fact that they do chicken in a very similar way. But where Chick-fil-A will not tell you where their chickens come from, Leghorn says exactly where the chicken in their chicken sandwiches, which is pretty much all they do, comes from. And think about how ridiculous that is. Chick-fil-A won't tell you where the chickens come from. But Leghorn will say, here's exactly the farm where our chickens come from. In the restaurant as well, the opposite of Chick-fil-A, where they talk about part of their proceeds. Right? That's the extent of the menu. That's the whole menu. Part of their proceeds go to feed or go to organizations that promote gender and sexuality equality. Chick-fil-A famously came out against gay marriage, and Leghorn, because they do very similar style food, said that was going to be their issue. And so if you want to support marriage equality, go to Leghorn. Get a delicious chicken sandwich. All right. There's so many more. You can't possibly get to them all. Everything in green here are breweries. These are all local breweries, craft breweries in the Chicagoland area where the quality of the beer is how they make their name. It's not about marketing. You're not going to see commercials for, Revolution Brewery or Half Acre. Maybe Goose Island because they're aligned with InBev now, but Goose Island is still very much qualifies as a legit Chicago craft brewery. And they give a sense of place. I think chief among why they're so good is they highlight the quality of the beer. Does it taste good? Tons of variety. But it's, hey, I'm in Beverly. I'm on Western Avenue. That's, one of the most iconic places to go out and have some beers in the city of Chicago. But now you have an option at Horse Thief Hollow to go and get beer that's made in Beverly by people who are from Beverly or support Beverly, that have a footprint there. And so it's not just the bar, but everything that bar does, including the food. On their menu, they have several options. They have a grass-fed beef burger option. They have, it's not a perfectly sustainable food place. Okay. But in many ways, it is. It is sustainable. It's all about the locality. They make very seasonal beers. They have seasonal dishes. And it's this sense of community that they're from. And the guy's from Mount Carmel, so got to support that. Should I keep going? I have way more than I can possibly do. 2 more breweries? Okay. Horse Thief Hollow in Beverly. About us, their beers. I want to just show you one. Yeah. They don't have a list of the breweries? Okay. All right. They have one thing called the Kitchen Sink, which is a beer I haven't had anywhere else, where they basically take leftover parts of all the different beers they make and they put it all into one beer. And you'd think it sounds gross. And sometimes it is kind of gross, but it's always a little bit different. That I like about it. It's like this sort of wild card beer. And instead of wasting, or instead of, I don't even know what they would do with that extras, they're finding a way to use it. Oh yeah, see, that's the ends. No, what I'm saying is in the process. So the barley, the malted barley, they don't use, it's just a little bit that's off for the, for the recipe for one of their beers. It's the pre-brewed ingredients, Yeah, like the wheat for a wheat beer, or some adjunct grain for something else. Yeah, that other thing, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Three Floyds, I guess, qualifies as a South Side spot. It's probably got the most connoisseur reputation of all the breweries in Chicagoland. Their brewer is legit. I mean, he collaborates with some of the most revered European brewers. I just read about him in the New Yorker. He was collaborating with this Danish gypsy brewer, they call it, because he doesn't have his own brewery, this guy in Denmark, but he's famous for having this amazing palate and creative inventions for how to put beers together. And he wanted to work with Hammond, Indiana's Three Floyds. And rightfully so. I mean, they have this beer, Zombie Dust, that people go crazy for. It's a limited edition. Yeah, Dark Lord, Robert the Bruce. Their beers are fantastic. The brew pub is fantastic. On the menu, the menu doesn't tell you online where they source their ingredients. But, yeah, each season, right, ingredients from local farms, a new seasonal menu. But when you're at the restaurant, I was there about a year ago, and I went to get the burger, and I believe I missed it, but I said, where does the beef come from? They're like, oh yeah, and they told me the farm right away. And then they told me all about the farm. And, more than happy, more than transparent and proud of the quality of ingredients that go into the food that they're selling to you. Excellent beer, great food. Don't let anyone tell you that Three Floyds is oh, I'm over Three Floyds or all that. That's one of the problems too with sustainable things, is this sort of conflation with these stereotypes of being a hipster, or stereotypes about you've got to be on to the next thing, and the minute someone else is once something becomes popular, it's devalued, it's no longer cool. That is garbage. That is total garbage. No. Goose Island has been criticized for that. Go to the Goose Island Brewery. Look at the menu. Look at how they tell you where the food comes from. Drink the beers. Look at the craftsmanship that goes into it. They don't care that they're popular. You can get a Goose Island in Florida or something like that. Yeah, you can't get Three Floyds everywhere.
I just kind of funny when 312 was bought out by a company in New York. It was the bottle, and it said 312 bottled in New York.
Yeah. Well, soon you're going to have Lagunitas, a California brewery, opening a brewery in Chicago and all that. But this California brewery is made up from guys from the Midwest, from Chicago, from St. Louis, from Wisconsin. I think that if a beer is made in a place and then sold and distributed there, it's important because that gives that sense of identity, of community. Like, that's our local beer. That's from here. You can have a connection with it, and it's something that's unique. Someone comes from somewhere else, and you want to see manifestations of you're in a particular place. You're not in generic, nowhere. But if somewhere it's called contract brewing, this is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a great brewery from Maryland and from Colorado called Flying Dog. They do contract brewing. Brooklyn Brewery does contract brewing. Goose Island does it where they, in their brew pubs, they brew beer. In their location on Fulton Avenue in Westtown, they brew beer. But the quantity of beer they brew is, they can't do it in those two places, so they go elsewhere. I'm all right with it. As long as the quality of the brewing process, of the ingredients, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Especially when we consider that craft beer only accounts for, a fraction of the overall beer market still, even though craft beer has been growing in double digits for over a decade. And the big brewers have been contracting for decades. Budweiser has had falling market share for year over year without end for decades. They're dying a slow death, and it happens to the big brands. When your number one ingredient in your product is marketing, eventually people get tired of it. That's it. But when you have the quality of the product, when it's the number one ingredient is the quality of the ingredients, that's what makes it good, you can have much more longevity. Revolution Brewing is the last brewery I'll talk about. Excellent one on the northwest side of the city in Logan Square. This is their brew pub. They just recently opened the brew house on Kedzie, north of Diversey. And there was a movie starring Olivia Wilde and Ron Livingston. Did you see any of this? This came out last summer. A big movie that took place at the Revolution Brewery. And I don't know, it's kind of fun to, hey, that's a place I know in a movie with Olivia Wilde. Amazing beer. Amazing beer. When you go to the restaurant, they tell you where the food comes from. They're very proud of it. They make excellent seasonal food, right? Yeah, they bake all of the breads and the pizzas. They make all the doughs and bake them all fresh there. They go to local farms where they source their meat. They make their charcuterie in the house. It's just sort of a sense of identity that they lend by being there and by being so self-sufficient. So there you go. There's Metropolitan, there's soon to be Lagunitas, Half Acre, Flossmoor Station in Flossmoor. Too many to really count, but hopefully you get a little bit of an idea of some places, maybe trigger. Go to Calumet Fisheries.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you, Bill. That was awesome. So much to think about and talk about and eat and explore. A quick question for you. Two quick questions. One, is this information available? Can we get this map somehow?
I'll do that.
Okay. Maybe send me the link and I can tweet it out.
Awesome.
And share it, and then maybe we can figure out another way to make it available to others. But then just kind of wrap up, you talked about sense of place and knowing where your food comes from and, listing ingredients, etc. Can you just kind of summarize, if I was to go look for sustainable food or sustainable beer, what would be like a definition I should be using when I walk into a place? Or you have a mic.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to double mine. I would say that because there are so many aspects of it, and that I really am not someone that is looking for every one of those sustainability aspects to be hit perfectly. To go into a place and it's like, oh, you have, pasture-raised, grass-fed beef, and I want to get that, but you don't have energy-efficient appliances, and you don't, and to focus on that would not be good. So I would say that where does it come from? That's ultimately the primary question. Like, if you go into a restaurant and you can ask them, where does this food that you're serving to me come from? And they can answer you, that's probably the number one thing I'm looking for. When it comes to beer, I think that that's not as tricky, because while some breweries that I didn't highlight, like for example, New Belgium Brewery or Sierra Nevada, they have these amazingly sort of renewable resource, their breweries are run with sort of zero carbon emissions. You don't necessarily have to know about that. I think with craft brewery, it's all about that sense of identity, that sense of authenticity. And yeah, there are some of the macro brews that are trying to like infiltrate that, but for the most part, you can tell. So like, again, where does it come from? Is it made in Chicago? Okay. If it's a beer made in Chicago and I'm in Chicago, I can feel pretty good about that being more or less sustainable. If I'm in Nashville, is this beer made in Nashville or in Tennessee? If I'm in, that's the big thing. Where does it come from? Like what's the place? And with regard to food, can you tell me about the production of that? And if the place can't,
Maybe not so good.
it's probably not good. It's probably not good.
Awesome.
And I think that it's insane that that's even an option. I think that you're going into restaurant management and all that. I just don't think that in the course of your career, it will remain that way. That it'll even be possible to not be able to fully and with confidence tell your customers where the food you're serving them comes from.
If they just want to cut corners and find the cheapest product that will last the longest, that's what they're going to do. It depends on, you got to talk to the owners, you got to talk to them and be sure that they're looking out for you and they're not looking out for their pocket.
But I don't think that there's going to be much viability in that sort of model. As
McDonald's still exists, McDonald's feeds more people in the world than anyone else every day, and they buy probably the cheapest meat they possibly can. Same thing, they cheapest, produce, cheapest everything. People still buy it. Some people don't care, Some people, they're like, oh, this is convenient and right here, I can buy this, I will buy it. You got to emphasize to the people that they should worry about that, if you look at the ratio between healthcare and money that we spend on food, if we spent the money that we're spending on healthcare for the same issues on the food that we're buying, it would, equal out.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. I think that you're right that this is an issue that's not going to be solved quickly, but I'm just telling you in 2005, I moved to New York City, and I had never heard word one about local, seasonal, organic. I'd never heard anything about any of that. And I moved into Brooklyn, and I lived there for 5 years. And in the course of that time, I just sort of, by living there and that being such a part of, that became the norm during that time. It just seemed like, how could it be any other way that you're going to eat food and not know that food that you're eating? And since then, I've seen it move all over the country. I've seen it not just in cities. I've seen it all over. And it just continues to grow and expand, and that awareness. And I think that it's not only logical, like you're saying, or there'll be people, you can make the argument about healthcare and about, if we spent more on healthcare, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but how we eat is not just a logical thing. It's actually one of the least logical, like this, when we are hungry, logic goes out the window, you know? Hey, I'm thinking about my weight. I don't want to eat that fattening thing. But when you're hungry, give it to me, you know? Like, logic in so many ways is just not this big factor. But there are so many other aspects to sustainability that are compelling, and that once they're there, they're hard to ignore when it comes to food, when it comes to drink. And you can look at Walmart as an example of a big player in the food industry. And the way that they're reacting to this is by trying to sort of absorb it, trying to co-opt, some people would say, like, you know, placate customers, whatever. But the way I look at it is that's the biggest of the big, and they're seeing what's happening, and they're reacting in a way. Sure, and they're not willing to change, as in it's like, you know what, you've made a good argument, I'm going to change. They're being forced to change. They're smart enough. I would say they're smart enough to change.
As a business, you're going to do what's most cost effective until something makes sense.
Or, you know, that is absolutely part of it. But the other thing is they have to forecast what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15 years. In a company that size can't change the way they do business, the way that they identify themselves, and the image they create. They can't just change it immediately, and they're not going to. So the fact that they're reacting the way they are, and they're not alone. You know, McDonald's will tout, like, you know, sustainably caught fish and all that. I mean, why are they even mentioning it? When you look at the numbers, it's such an insignificant number. I mean, people eat at McDonald's. They don't eat at Leghorn. But so how is Leghorn and these places like that, how are these craft breweries, how are they having such a major impact on the big boys? Because I think that they're seeing that it's going to happen, that once the cat's out of the bag, people aren't going to go from, I really care about my food, to, I no longer care about my food. I don't think that'll work.
Right.
Awesome.
Awesome comments. Thank you so much, Bill. Again, thank you so much. I think to wrap this up, basically we've learned a lot, and now we need to keep talking about it so that we can continue the movement and promoting the sustainable choices that we have, so we have more. 2 quick plugs. Later this month, April 25th, if students are interested in learning more about the sustainability of food, April 25th is our Student Sustainability Summit here on campus in the Moraine rooms from 8:30 until 2 p.m., talking about food through the lens of sustainability. As well, April 28th, Bill Curtis, our very own, coming back to Chicago to talk about the topic of his discussion will be Death by Food, the American Diet, how it's killing us and what we can do about it. So that's April 28th here in the Dorothy Manker Theater, beginning at 7 p.m., I believe. More information at morainevalley.edu/sustainability. And again, thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Stephanie.